Amateur radio describes the use of radio frequency spectra for purposes of non-commercial exchange of messages, wireless experimentation, self-training, private recreation and emergency communication. The term amateur is used to specify a duly authorized person interested in radioelectric practice with a purely personal aim and without pecuniary interest, and to differentiate it from commercial broadcasting, public safety, or professional two-way radio services. The amateur radio service is established by the International Telecommunication Union through the International Telecommunication Regulations. National governments regulate technical and operational characteristics of transmissions and issue individual stations licenses with an identifying call sign. Prospective amateur operators are tested for their understanding of key concepts in electronics and the host government's radio regulations. Radio amateurs use a variety of voice, text, image, and data communications modes and have access to frequency allocations throughout the RF spectrum to enable communication across a city, region, country, continent, the world, or even into space. Amateur radio is officially represented and coordinated by the International Amateur Radio Union, which is organized in 3 regions and has as its members the national amateur radio societies which exist in most countries. According to an estimate made in 2011 by the American Radio Relay League, 2 million people throughout the world are regularly involved with amateur radio. About 830,000 amateur radio stations are located in IARU Region 2, followed by IARU Region 3 with about 750,000 stations. A significantly smaller number, about 400,000, are located in IARU Region 1. History. The origins of amateur radio can be traced to the late 19th century, but amateur radio as practiced today began in the early 20th century. The first annual official wireless Blue Book of the Wireless Association of America, produced in 1909, contains a list of amateur radio stations. This radio call book lists wireless telegraph stations in Canada and the United States, including 89 amateur radio stations. As with radio in general, amateur radio was associated with various amateur experimenters and hobbyists. Amateur radio enthusiasts have significantly contributed to science, engineering, industry, and social services. Research by amateur operators has founded new industries, built economies, empowered nations, and saved lives in times of emergency. Ham radio can also be used in the classroom to teach English, map skills, geography, math, science and computer skills. Ham radio. The term, ham radio, was first a pejorative that mocked amateur radio operators, with a 19th century term for being bad at something, like ham-fisted, or ham actor. It had already been used for bad wired telegraph operators. Subsequently, the community adopted it as a welcome moniker, much like the Know Nothing Party, or other groups and movements throughout history. Other, more entertaining explanations have grown up throughout the years, but they are apocryphal. Activities and practices. The many facets of amateur radio attract practitioners with a wide range of interests. Many amateurs begin with the fascination of radio communication and then combine other personal interests to make pursuit of the hobby rewarding. Some of the focal areas amateurs pursue include radio contesting, radio propagation study, public service communication, technical experimentation, and computer networking. Amateur radio operators use various modes of transmission to communicate. The 2 most common modes for voice transmissions are frequency modulation and single sideband. FM offers high-quality audio signals, while SSB is better at long-distance communication when bandwidth is restricted. Radio telegraphy using Morse code, also known as CW, from continuous wave, is the wireless extension of landline telegraphy developed by Samuel Morse and dates to the earliest days of radio. Although computer-based modes and methods have largely replaced CW for commercial and military applications, Many amateur radio operators still enjoy using the CW mode, particularly on the shortwave bands and for experimental work, such as Earth-Moon-Earth communication, because of its inherent signal-to-noise ratio advantages. Morse, using internationally agreed message encodings such as the Q code, enables communication between amateurs who speak different languages. It is also popular with home brewers and in particular with QRP, or very low power enthusiasts, as a CW-only transmitters are simpler to construct, and the human ear-brain signal processing system can pull weak CW signals out of the noise where voice signals would be totally inaudible. A similar, legacy, mode popular with home constructors is amplitude modulation, pursued by many vintage amateur radio enthusiasts and aficionados of vacuum tube technology. Demonstrating a proficiency in Morse code was for many years a requirement to obtain an amateur license to transmit on frequencies below 30 MHz. Following changes in international regulations in 2003, countries are no longer required to demand proficiency. The United States Federal Communications Commission, for example, phased out this requirement for all license classes on February 23, 2007. Modern personal computers have encouraged the use of digital modes such as radio teletype, which previously required cumbersome mechanical equipment. Hams led the development of packet radio in the 1970s, which has employed protocols such as AX25 and TCP/IP. Specialized digital modes such as PSK31 allow real-time, low-power communications on the shortwave bands. Echolink, using voice-over-IP technology, has enabled amateurs to communicate through local internet-connected repeaters and radio nodes, while IRLP has allowed the linking of repeaters to provide greater coverage area. Automatic link establishment has enabled continuous amateur radio networks to operate on the high-frequency bands with global coverage. Other modes, such as FSK 441 using software such as WSJT, are used for weak signal modes including meteor scatter and moon bounce communications. Fast-scan amateur television has gained popularity as hobbyists adapt inexpensive consumer video electronics like camcorders and video cards in PCs. Because of the wide bandwidth and stable signals required, amateur television is typically found in the 70 cm frequency range, though there is also limited use on 33 cm, 23 cm and higher. These requirements also effectively limit the signal range to between 20 and 60 miles. Linked repeater systems, however, can allow transmissions of VHF and higher frequencies across hundreds of miles. Repeaters are usually located on heights of land or tall structures and allow operators to communicate over hundreds of miles using handheld or mobile transceivers. Repeaters can also be linked together by using other amateur radio bands, landline, or the Internet. Amateur radio satellites can be accessed, some using a handheld transceiver, even, at times, using the factory rubber duck antenna. Hams also use the Moon, the aurora borealis, and the ionized trails of meteors as reflectors of radio waves. Hams can also contact the International Space Station because many astronauts and cosmonauts are licensed as amateur radio operators. Amateur radio operators use their amateur radio station to make contacts with individual hams as well as participating in roundtable discussion groups or rag-chew sessions on the air. Some join in regularly scheduled on-air meetings with other amateur radio operators, called nets, which are moderated by a station referred to as net control. Nets can allow operators to learn procedures for emergencies, be an informal roundtable, or cover specific interests shared by a group. Amateur radio operators, using battery or generator-powered equipment, often provide essential communications services when regular channels are unavailable due to natural disaster or other disruptive events. Many amateur radio operators participate in radio contests, during which an individual or team of operators typically seek to contact and exchange information with as many other amateur radio stations as possible in a given period of time. In addition to contests, a number of amateur radio operating award schemes exist, sometimes suffixed with "on the air", such as Summits on the Air, Islands on the Air, Worked All States, and Jamboree on the Air.